everybody, this is Perch. I've talked a lot about variants and generally how I dislike them. And to keep in mind, it's not that I dislike the art. It's not that I dislike the different styles and other things going on. It's fine. And by and large, if I'm being fair, variants are a option for readers. They're not forced to buy it. But the what I dislike about it is usually the program around the variants, the incentive programs the comic shop has to sign up for in order to receive them, and the fact that the comic industry itself, the publishers, have become fairly addicted to the revenue that the variants bring in, rather than do basic things like, I don't know, just handle their own marketing or make sure that their titles are sold in more places. They've become addicted to this. Hey, do we need to boost the numbers on this book? Let's do a variant. Are the numbers not boosted enough? Let's do two variants. That's not a good recipe for success, but the publishers are obsessed to keep going with it. But this reader asks a perfectly good, reasonable question about variants, and it goes like this. It says, "Hey, Perch, I live in a small town with the nearest comic store being an hour drive, so I do most of my comic shopping online. I've noticed a lot of comic shops on eBay seem stuck with incentive covers from far back as 2 years ago. The last time I was in a shop pre-COVID, they had like 20 copies of a recent Justice League issue on discount. And when I looked online, sure enough, this issue had a nice looking incentive variant. On eBay, I've seen people still trying to unload Berserker #1 variant multi-packs. Similar thing with Geiger and Noctera. Hell, my subscription store still has a new 52 floppies, and that's saying something since they deal only direct market. When these over-ordered books wind up taking up space other stock could fill, some people can't unload these variants even years later for a discount. I have to ask, are variant covers really worth it? Are they worth that much? If just one small town store has 20 issues of a comic sitting in a discount bin, how inflated are the sales of some of these books? A lot of stores wind up resorting to the mystery grab bags to sell this stock. Also imagine being a newbie, seeing 20 unsold copies of a title in a row. It won't exactly seem worth buying. So a couple things there. First of all, that experience is pretty common. I think many people probably can identify with that. So first off, well, let's talk about variant covers for a moment, because one of the big misnomers that people have is that if you buy a variant cover, it's automatically going to be worth more in value. And that's not entirely true. In a lot of cases, variant covers are based on scarcity, it's based on artist, it's based on interest, and it may or may not go up in value. Sometimes it does go down depending on the amount. A lot of that's because the shop will boost and inflate the variant cover to what they think it's worth, not necessarily what it actually can hold. And in many cases, it doesn't hold those rates. So, variant covers are not a perfect, for a collector, for somebody who's trying to flip comics down the road. It's not a perfect system. You very likely could wind up with a book that is worth no more than anything else. The other thing to remember is if you just look at comics in general, they all go up in value at different rates depending on different things that are going on. Variants are the same. They are comic books after all. And so it's not like every single variant is going to magically be, foolproof from going up in value. Some will, and many won't, just like every other comic book. The difference there is that variants, because you're paying more upfront and because they're marketed as being somehow unique, you have the impression that you're automatically guaranteed a good return, and that's definitely not the case. So variants are, what I like to tell people is if you like the artist, if you like the product you're getting, go for it. But if you're getting it for collector value, you're probably not going to like what you wind up with. That's just, it's unlikely to give you the kind of return that just say, getting hot back issues or getting a specific other issue will do. The variant issues that become kind of guaranteed must sell, hold their value, tend to be ones that are extremely expensive in the first place. And even there, unlike other things where a comic book might go up in value because of the first appearance of a character or, a artist on a book for the first time and they later become more famous. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why comics may gain in value. Variants, you're kind of stuck with what's inside the book, and you're also stuck with whoever the buyer is wanting that particular artist. So I remember people coming in and wanting to buy kind of the pet versions of the Marvel characters variant covers, or and are people going to want that in the future? It's hard to imagine they will at an extremely high marked up price. So anyway, I don't think there were beyond that. The other things you're mentioning is because of the unsold stock that winds up in a shop. That's the entire problem with variants in the first place. It is a fundamentally just a money making scheme where it's working out better at the moment for the publisher because the retailers are by and large suckered or in some cases forced into buying these books. The most common thing that happens is a regular comes in and says, I want the variant for this title. The retailer goes and looks it up and says, I have to order 20 copies of that book in order to get you that variant. So I'm going to sell that variant for, I don't know, $40. And the retailer is just doing some quick math going, well, if I sell it for $40, then I'm making basically what I'm paying for the 20 issues back. So I'm not losing money. I'm not really making money either. It's kind of sold at a wash. But I've then got those 20 issues of the comic. And if I can flip them somewhere or do something with them, then that's where my profit will come from. And so that's how the game gets made. And so the publisher gets their money up front and the retailer takes the risk of can they actually, pull off that scheme they've got in their head. And if you go to a half price books or you go to places like that, you will see, like you described, big stacks of certain comic books. And every single time you see that, it's because the comic shop ordered high in order to get the variant that they could sell to a regular. And then they tried to unload it for a couple months. And then failing that, they took it off to half price books and got, 25 cents a copy for it. And it was, they were still making a small amount of money because they made the original margin on the variant that they sold to the whale. But this isn't a healthy business. This is just kind of polluting the world with copies of stuff that nobody really expects to sell. And that's the core problem right now with a lot of comics and a lot of what's going on. It's not built, it's not priced, it's not created in such a way that's going to generate, a guaranteed return. So, I go back and forth on this because a lot of people will push back and say, hey, the variance, it's an opt-in scheme. If the readers didn't want it, they don't have to buy it. If the retailers didn't want it, they don't have to buy it. And that's true. I've made that argument myself. It is true. But something being true still doesn't make it healthy. Yeah, the retailers could just stop. And I wish the retailers by and large would stop because then it would send a message back to the publishers that, hey, this isn't the way to kind of make up your profits. I also think in terms of kind of the overall, unhealthiness of the industry, there are changes that the publishers arguably should make, that the publishers, in many cases, maybe somewhere deep down know they should make. But at the end of the day, it is much easier to crank out a variant cover for a book to boost the sales 10% than actually do harder work of marketing the book better, figuring out other places where it could sell, do a better job of actually soliciting and pushing that book. I mean, the simple fact of the matter is, and I think a lot of writers out there who do comics would agree with this, if you read the solicitation for the comics when they're going into previews or they're being sold to the retailers, those solicitations often sound like, I've said this before too, the least possible amount of effort is given to putting that together. They often write things that are not really connected with the book itself. In some cases, it's extremely misleading what it says. In some cases, it just adds no information whatsoever. Imagine if the editors of people putting together solicitations actually read the comic book, spent some time trying to figure out what was in that comic book, and then worried about the variant cover last. But instead, what's happening is the solicitations are just done as fast as humanly possible with no thought or consideration given to them. More time is given into, do we want to do 2 variants or 3 variants or 10 variants to this comic? And that's the game. It works. Again, it boosts the sales up, but it's a short-term, very unhealthy boost that leaves a lot of backstock behind. It's a good question. I don't think in the end they're worth it. In the short term, yeah, they're building in money, but I think this is all part of, in my list of like 10 things, this is definitely in that top 10 of a unhealthy practice that is actively hurting comic books. The other part is I think it's uncreative. So, I often go back to, look, if you're a comic publisher and you have the money and you have the ability to get covers, basically graded by artists. You can go out to J. Scott Campbell, you can go out to Art Adams, you can get some of these specialty covers made. Can't you do better than a variant? If you've got that art there, can't you, I often go back to, hey, if you put out a comic book once a year of covers and sketches, the process of Art Adams, for example, the process of J. Scott Campbell, basically take his drawings, take kind of the sketches he does to create the cover, put it in a nice heavier stock comic, sell that. What would that sell for? I think that would probably sell pretty well. Would it sell as well as a variant cover scheme for one book? Um, you know, Maybe. Here's the thing: if Spider-Man's like let's say 80,000 copies on regular, but you put out a new number one with variant covers, and that's going to get you up to 200,000 copies, right? More than double. But issue two is going to go right back to 80. So all you've done is you bought yourself 120,000 extra copies of this book. Okay, you've got like 30 some variant covers going on in that thing. Some of those by pretty popular, pretty well-known artists. If you took some of those pretty popular, pretty well-known artists and you just put out a art book, once or twice a year with those artists, how much would that sell? Would it sell 40,000 copies, 50,000 copies? All right. If you get 5 or 6 of those selling 40,000, 50,000 copies, wouldn't you make the same amount as your variant cover, but doing it in a healthier way that doesn't threaten to kind of tip over the industry with a bunch of junk comics coming out? I don't know. That's not the look. I'll be the first to admit that's not the best idea, but I still think it's healthier and a better idea, and potentially better for money long term than what you're doing now. I And again, maybe it wouldn't be so bad if there was one variant cover or two variant covers, but when you're doing the 30 variant covers and a big incentive program and a buy-in to this process, I mean, it starts to get pretty silly pretty fast. And I think I think it's doing real harm to the business. I mean, when does all this collapse? I mean, here's the scary part is that at one point, the whale stops buying the variant cover. They just are uninterested. The comic shop, which has built up its business model around that person, now is in a hole. They haven't attracted the new customers in to actually go for some of these extra comics they have on hand. That idea of buying the one expensive comic and selling the stuff off at half-price books no longer works, and that's how you get the mystery bags and because whales disappear from comic shops all the time. And when you see something like that, it's generally an indication. Or if you go into the comic shop, you look behind the counter, and there's variant covers there that are priced very expensive. Those are generally variant covers that were ordered for someone who decided, you know what, I don't want it after all, or they just stopped. That's where a lot of that stuff comes from. Again, it's not healthy. And I also think that we're seeing some of the results of, you get big publishers now who feel they can't sell a new comic without variants, that they can't afford to put out number one without a bunch of variants because they no longer know how the business model works without it. So I think that's a problem. But anyway, no, I don't think it's worth it. And I think these are all the reasons why it's unhealthy and bad. Anyway, there you go. What do you think? Variant covers. Love them, hate them, don't care? Do I make a good point? What else would you do with the money, the time, and the artists? I mean, here's an even crazier idea. You've got somebody like an Art Adams, like a J. Scott Campbell, who's doing your variant covers. You got a Mark Brooks out there. They're doing, 12, probably more than that, a year, probably more like 20 pieces of art a year. What if you just had them do like one comic a year, interiors, actual comic? Now, I know a lot of these creators, they like doing it this way because they can sell the art for, the covers are worth more when they sell it themselves. There's reasons why they might not love this plan. But could you not take, the funding you're going to do and just put out, a original graphic novel by Art Adams once a year? What would that sell? Anyway, thanks for listening.